Let's talk about this article that was published earlier this week on CNBC. The world will have its first trillionaire within a decade. But poverty will not be eradicated for another 229 years, report finds. As we can see, this was published on January 22nd by Jessica Dickler, and a reason why I want to check out this article is because it's been posted by a few anti-capitalist asshats, including More Perfect Union, who says, we cannot let this level of inequality exist. And then we got this guy who I've talked about before in previous videos. He has 304,000 followers on Elon Musk's website, formerly known as Twitter. Actually, let's go back to More Perfect Union. You can tell this got a lot of impressions on Elon Musk's website, just shy of 5,000 likes, got over 1.4 million views. But then this guy retweeted it saying that, yeah, capitalism gotta go.
Blow it out your ass.
This particular one got 55,000 likes and 1.2 million views. And I find this amusing that the takeaway is that capitalism gotta go when capitalism is the best political system for eradicating poverty. All while poverty is rampant and widespread in more socialist political systems. Oops. Then there's the fact that capitalism is not really defined here. I imagine that a lot of people, when they throw it around in this context, they just mean whatever the status quo in places like America is. America with its mixed economy and its massive regulatory state and its generous welfare states. And it is a generous welfare state. Don't let anyone try to tell you otherwise. I just saw this going around again, this cartoon. 1 million views, 81,000 likes. This cartoon that I've talked about before that suggests that war and the military gets all this money while education and healthcare get nothing. When in fact, both education and healthcare alone, each respectively, get more money than the military. So don't let anyone try to tell you otherwise. But despite all of this, despite the massive regulatory state and the massive generous welfare state in America, even according to sources cited in this article, poverty has been on the decline. Article says, in just 3 years, the world has witnessed a supercharged surge in extreme wealth.
Oh, SpaghettiOs!
New data shows in the US alone, billionaires are 46% richer than they were in 2020, while the three wealthiest men, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Larry Ellison, have increased their net worth by 84%, a recent Oxfam report on global inequality found. Yet, despite the fact that America ranks first as the richest nation in the world, in terms of gross domestic product, 37.9 million Americans live in poverty, accounting for 11.5% of the total population, according to the latest report from the U.S. Census Bureau. And yet, if we look at this report from the U.S. Census Bureau, as you can see, it was put up just this month, January of 2024, National Poverty in America Awareness Month. As you can see with this data, even according to data, again, that's cited in this article that these anti-capitalist asshats are running with, poverty, as we can see, both in terms of total number of Americans and the poverty rates, have both declined for roughly the last 14 to 15 years. If you look at these charts, since 2010, both the total number of people in poverty and the poverty rates as a percentage of the population have both been on the decline. Keep in mind, this is coinciding with all of this horrible inequality that we keep hearing about, which I think serves as a nice reminder that inequality statistics and poverty rates are not necessarily the same thing. And then there is the issue of how poverty is defined. The way poverty is measured by the U.S. Census Bureau, it doesn't really talk much about stuff like quality of life, standard of living. It's just based entirely on income statistics. Even this article on USA Facts talks about this. Talks about how, according to the most recent report issued in January 2023, the poverty threshold for a family of four is just shy of $30,000. For an individual, the poverty threshold is just shy of $15,000. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services issues its poverty guidelines based on the Census Bureau's poverty thresholds. They're used to determine the financial eligibility for certain government programs, including Head Start, SNAP, the school lunch program, and low-income home energy assistance program. So whenever we hear about these income statistics, they're not counting stuff like government programs. They're used to determine eligibility for said program. The U.S. Census issues its poverty thresholds based on Orshansky's work. These figures take into account household size and income, as well as other factors such as age. These poverty thresholds are used for statistical purposes to calculate the number of Americans living in poverty. They are also the starting points from which the federal poverty guidelines are calculated. This article also mentions how the 2023 median household income for a family of four is $98,000, which I don't know about you guys. That sounds like a pretty good trend to me. Half of American households with a family of four is surviving on more than $98,000. Sounds like a pretty good trend. And then there's this chart from the American Enterprise Institute, which I brought up before. It might be outdated at this point because it only goes to 2019. But as we can see, the low income bracket in America since 1967 has declined from 36% to 25%. So again, it seems like by the measures of the U.S. Census Bureau, people living in poverty based entirely on income statistics has been on the decline. But going back to what I was talking about earlier, this only talks about income statistics. It doesn't talk about quality of life, standard of living, and in many cases, these income statistics that are used by the Census Bureau that is then thrown around by activists and political types and is often used in the media, it paints a bleaker picture than reality because it does not count stuff like employer benefits, government assistance programs. This is something that Thomas Sowell talks about in his book, Economic Facts and Fallacies.
Read a book, read a book, read a motherfucking book. Read a book, read a book, read a motherfucking book.
Sowell says most statistics on income inequality are very misleading in yet another way. These statistics almost invariably leave out money received as transfers from the government in various programs for low-income people, which provide benefits of substantial value for which the recipients pay nothing. Since people in the bottom 20% of income recipients receive more than 2/3 of their income from transfer payments, leaving those cash payments out of the statistics greatly exaggerates their poverty. And leaving out in-kind transfers as well, such as subsidized housing, distorts their economic situation even more. In 2001, for example, cash and in-kind transfers together counted for 77.8% of the economic resources of the people in the bottom 20%. In other words, the alarming statistics on their incomes so often cited in the media and by politicians count only 22% of the actual economic resources at their disposal. And yeah, we see more of it right here. We see these headlines that use income statistics from the U.S. Census Bureau that reports that it's as high as 38 million Americans, 11.5% of the total population, leaving aside the fact that these rates have been on a decline for roughly the last 15 years. And then political and activist types just run with it and talk about how capitalism has got to go. And while I'm here, I do want to make something clear because I imagine some people might see this commentary I'm pointing out and say, Well, isn't this proof that the welfare state is working? If it's alleviating poverty, if it's giving money to those people who don't make a lot of money, doesn't this make the welfare state justifiable?
Yeah, to the no, yeah, to the no, to the no, no, no.
Well, I should probably make it clear that my standard is freedom. It's not which political system is best for alleviating poverty. But it just so happens to be the case that freer countries, more capitalist countries, are better systems for alleviating poverty. And I don't think the ends justify the means here. I don't think that a society is truly free if politicians and the government can shake down its citizens, impose taxes, take money from people's paychecks to dole out to special interest groups and other beloved pressure groups. The point I'm making is that anti-capitalist asshats are not motivated by alleviating poverty. They don't want a relatively free market that just taxes everyone in the name of giving the poor some financial assistance. A lot of these people want to end capitalism altogether.
That's just not smart.
Or in the case of Oxfam, which the CNBC article cites, which I'll get into in a second, you'll see right here that they're not really interested in alleviating poverty. Rather, they are mostly interested in reducing the gap between the rich and the rest of society. Again, a lot of these people, they conflate poverty rates with income inequality rates, when they are not the same thing. And then there's also the fact that these income statistics, again, they don't really tell us much about the standard of living or the quality of life, like how much people spend on stuff like groceries and utilities, what kind of appliances and other luxuries people in the lower income brackets might be enjoying. They just tell us about income statistics. And this is something that Thomas Sowell talks about later in his book, when he talks about how income and wealth are not only different in concept, they are very different in terms of who has how much of each. Among the people with low incomes who are not poor are the following: wives of affluent or rich men and husbands of affluent or rich women. Affluent or wealthy speculators, investors, and business owners whose enterprises are having an off year and who may even be losing money in a given year. People who graduate in the middle of the year from high schools, colleges, or postgraduate institutions, and who therefore earn only 1/2 or less of what they will be earning the following year. Doctors, dentists, and other independent professionals who are just beginning their careers and who have not yet built up a sufficient clientele to pay office and other expenses, with enough left over to create an income at all comparable to what they will be making in a few years. Young adults living in the homes of affluent or wealthy parents, rent-free or living elsewhere at their parents' expense, while they explore their possibilities, work sporadically or in low-paid entry-level jobs or as volunteers in philanthropic or political enterprises. Retirees who have no rent to pay or mortgage payments to make because they own their homes and who have larger assets in general than younger people have, even if the retiree's current income is low. Now, one may say that what Thomas Sowell talks about in his book are anomalies. Maybe all the people he talks about, they might be a small portion of the people in the low income bracket, which gets to my next point, that these income rates, these poverty statistics tell us nothing about economic mobility. I think that's what's more interesting. Do the people who start out in poverty, working in the lower income brackets, do they end up rising out of it? And if so, how do they rise out of it? If poverty in America is defined entirely by a low income, which this article does, chances are there are going to be a lot of people in these thresholds, as Sowell mentions, who are there by a mere fact that they just graduated high school, they just graduated college, they're just getting started with their careers. You're always going to have a significant portion of the population who are in these lower income brackets. You could also say the same thing about immigrants who come to America from a poorer country with nothing. and then start out in these lower income brackets. And as they work, they make more and more money as they grow in their careers. And again, this is something that Sowell talks about in his book, Economic Facts and Fallacies. So in other words, it's not like people who are in these low income brackets that are defined in these poverty rates are just doomed to stay in the low income brackets forever. But this article also mentions this recent report from Oxfam, which is a long report, so I'm not going to bother to read the entire thing. Bernie Sanders, of all people, wrote the introduction, which that alone makes me suspicious of the reports. And then you get implications like this implied zero-sum fallacy with this graphic in the Oxfam report talking about how the world's richest 5 men have more than doubled their wealth since 2020. All while 5 billion people were made poorer. The impression I get is that they're saying that by the mere fact of these 5 men doubling their wealth, they must have taken it from these 5 billion people. Is that what happened?
Yeah, to the no, yeah, to the no, to the no, no, no.
And we know this didn't happen because usually when we hear about this doubling of wealth or whatever, it's usually based, and I hate to beat this dead horse, but it's usually based on the market value of their assets. And we know this because sometimes we get articles like this, also from CNBC from April 5th of 2023. The world's richest 25 people lost $200 billion last year. And this article mentions how Jeff Bezos, his net worth dropped by $57 billion due to Amazon's stock price declining by 38%. Elon Musk also ended up losing $39 billion. So when billionaires like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, when their net worth shrinks as a result of the market value of their assets decreasing, does that mean that the tens of billions of dollars that they lost, does it magically go to other people?
No, of course not.
And then, of course, if you read on into this article, the solution to all this horrible inequality, and this alleged rampant poverty in places like America, of course the solution is going to be tax.
Blow it out your ass.
Which, okay, let's run with this for a second. Let's just think this through for a second. If we're going to apply this standard to a situation like this, where the 5 richest men doubled their wealth since 2020, all while 5 billion people were made poorer. Okay, why don't we just tax these guys at 100%? They're $807 billion in net worth. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, we can conceivably cash all of that out, seize all their assets, cash it out, and then we can dole up the $870 or so billion to the 5 billion people who were allegedly made poor. That would mean what? 5 billion people? These 5 billion people would get about, I think, $170 to $200. Would that be enough to move the needle? Would that be enough to raise them out of poverty?
No, of course not.
This Oxfam report also mentions how I think the 50 largest corporations or whatever, their total assets are worth something like $13 trillion. Imagine we do the same thing with those greedy corporations. If we can just liquidate their assets, cease their assets, liquidate them, cash them out, and dole them out to 5 billion people. Each one of these 5 billion people would probably get, I think, around $2,600, which might be nice for a little while. Might be good for their standard of living or whatever. And then what? What are these people going to do after they spend that $2,600? That doesn't even, especially in America with the poverty rates, for a lot of these people, might not be enough to raise them above the poverty threshold. But what are you going to do when these people run out of the $2,600? Especially in a world where the politicians of the world have basically told everyone that, hey, if you create anything of value, if you create a lot of money, if you create a business that's worth a lot of money, Well, hey, it might get plundered so that politicians can dole out the rewards to their precious pressure groups. Who in their right mind is going to want to create anything of value in a world like that? Then again, you don't really have to think long-term, right? You don't really have to think long-term. You don't really have to think about economics this much when you have altruism, right? This bullshit-ass morality, this ethical code that demonizes people for being selfish, for being greedy, for having too much stuff, for the crime of being rich. And you see it a lot with these solutions. Tax, 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 tax. And a lot of these people are also rich people, wealthy people. As we can see from this article on CNBC, it reports how a lot of these rich people, they're going to the World Economic Forum. They're going to Davos to beg politicians to increase their taxes. And isn't this a self-defeating standard, by the way? This notion that we're essentially going to help the poor by what? Essentially making it illegal to become rich. Especially people who take this standard to its logical extremes by either ending capitalism or putting caps, as the Oxfam report suggests, putting caps on how much money people are allowed to make and accumulate. Then you got other knuckleheads who say that we should abolish billionaires altogether.
Blow it out your ass.
Isn't this a self-defeating strategy, trying to help the poor by essentially making it illegal to become rich?
That's just not smart.
And what kind of message does that send to the people that we're trying to help, apparently? We're going to tax people, we're going to liquidate their assets, and we're going to tax the shit out of them. And we're going to dole it out to people who might need a little financial assistance and then say to them, here's some help. Hopefully that will be enough. Hopefully you'll take this money and make something of your life, create a lot of value and create a lot of wealth so that you too can be shaken down by charlatans and politicians. At the very least, these do-gooders who are running to the World Economic Forum begging the world's politicians to increase their taxes, I think they're really showing their asses by telling the world how incompetent they are, how they're too incompetent to just merely give their money away. Isn't that always amazing how the preachers of altruism often suck shits at living up to their own bullshit-ass morality? Although I'm suspicious that it's worse than that, because it's not enough for these people to be altruistic. I'm guessing they want to impose their bullshit-ass altruism on everyone else.
What an asshole!